Hey everyone, welcome back to the Phoenix's Tale, the weekly Harry Potter themed podcast where I am sharing my life story through a chapter by chapter analysis of the entire Harry Potter book series. I am your host Gabe, and this week we are diving into chapter 14, Norbert the Norwegian Ridgeback. That's a bit of a tongue twister. Anyway, let's dive into our recap. In this chapter, we see our golden trio keeping an eye on things with Snape and Quirrell when it comes to the Sorcerer's Stone. Hermione is beginning to become obsessed with studying for the upcoming end-of-year exams. During one such study session in the library, they see Hagrid, who, after Ron went to investigate, had been in the library looking for books about dragons. They also mentioned to Hagrid that they already found out about Nicholas Flamel, and they know that Fluffy is guarding the Sorcerer's Stone. And Hagrid freaks out about that. Shh, don't talk about it. So, after some chit-chat in the library, our golden trio go to Hagrid's cabin and proceed to ask him some questions when they finally notice the dragon egg in the fire. And naturally, this is something that's illegal, as Ron has informed Harry and Hermione. So now they're worried about Hagrid getting chucked out of Hogwarts because now he's got an illegal dragon egg, and they help him through the process. Once it's hatched, Harry, Ron, and Hermione are now concerned about what would happen if anybody found out, what would happen to Hagrid. In the end, they decide to send Norbert to Charlie Weasley in Romania, who's there studying dragons. And during the expedition of getting Norbert to the astronomy tower so Charlie's friends can pick up Norbert, Harry and Hermione, Ron was in the hospital wing because Norbert bit him and it became infected. Harry and Hermione had forgotten the invisibility cloak at the top of the astronomy tower, so when they come back down thinking they're in the all clear, Filch is waiting for them and marches them off to Professor McGonagall's office. She proceeds to take 50 points from each Harry, Hermione, and Neville, who had overheard Draco talking about the dragon. Draco's mixed up in this, trying to not only get Hagrid sacked, but to get our golden trio in trouble for helping him. On their way up to the astronomy tower, Harry and Hermione and Norbert, under the invisibility cloak, see that Professor McGonagall caught Malfoy out of bed, so he's in trouble. Detention and 20 points from Slytherin for him. Detention and 50 points each for Harry, Hermione, and Neville, as I just mentioned, because Neville was trying to warn Harry and do the right thing, but he got caught up and he got in trouble too. So now we have 4 Hogwarts students out of bed, and Professor McGonagall is just beside herself, and then they all have detention. So that's where we close out the chapter. Harry feeling like garbage, listening to Neville crying himself to sleep, and that he was not looking forward to waking up the next morning and seeing the reaction from his fellow Gryffindors when they realized that a whopping 150 points had been taken from Gryffindor. That's where we end the chapter. So I do have to admit that this is really the first chapter where I have found it difficult to connect anything to my life. So we're going to take a break from the heavy stuff, especially after last week's episode, and we're going to inject a little fun into this. So the first thing I want to mention here is how different the movies are from the books, because, and I will never make any claims otherwise, the movies are absolute fucking garbage compared to the books. I cannot stand the movies, and I don't know the last time I actually watched them at all. And this is the part that I hate in the movies, because it depicts Ron and not Neville as being part of the group of 4 who received detention. As I mentioned in the recap, and for those of us who know the story from the books, Ron was in the hospital wing because Norbert bit him. And he's a dragon, and it quickly became infected. So it was Harry and Hermione getting Norbert to the astronomy tower. Neville's out of bed because he heard Draco, who also got in trouble for being out of bed, trying to catch Harry and Hermione. In the movies, they made it Ron. And yes, it was a small thing, but at the same time, with the detail of the writing in the books, even in the first couple of books that we're going to be going through, it was imperative, not imperative, but it was an important part of the story that it was Neville, because when they first get to, actually that's next week's episode, never mind. Okay, a long story short, they serve their detention with Hagrid in the next chapter, and initially Harry and Hermione went with Hagrid, Draco and Neville went with Fang, and because Draco's an asshole, Hagrid has to go rescue them, and he switches things around, and so now Harry and Draco are with Fang, and then Neville and Hermione are with Hagrid. That's all I'm going to say about next week's episode. But because of what happens after that, it would not have happened. It would not have happened with Ron there, first of all. Ron would not have been as terrified about going into the forest, having Draco as a partner, as Neville did. So that's one of the things about the movies that absolutely fucking drives me up the wall, is those tiny changes that on the surface aren't a big deal, but as well as I know these stories from the books, it was kind of a key moment that Neville was the one serving the detention, not Ron. And I can understand the time constraints, because you're telling this huge story that I don't have it shown, but I believe the first book, the audio book, unabridged, is nearly 10 hours long just to tell the story in about an hour and a half to 2 hour window. But that was something that they could have done with some dialogue, as opposed to showing it the way they did, that Ron was in trouble, not Neville. So, I want to run through a series of questions about what we would each like our lives in the magical world to be. So, we're going to have some fun with this week, I think. And I asked my trusty AI tool, Perplexity AI, to give me some ideas. So they're going to be a bit of a hodgepodge of different questions. So the first question we're going to talk about is, if you could attend any class at Hogwarts, which one would you be most excited to attend? That's a tough one for me, because I have fun I would have fun in nearly every class. Professor Bin's History of Magic might bore the shit out of me a little bit, but at the same time, reading the book, that would be fun for me to learn history of magic. But my top 3 that I would have a hard time choosing from would be Charms, Transfiguration, and Defense Against the Dark Arts. And I'm thinking practically about this, because, thinking practically, I would actually have to add in herbology and potions, because as somebody who's passionate about mental health and passionate about finding ways that we can help ourselves when we're struggling with our mental health, especially those of us who are struggling to get the therapy we need, whether it's financial, whether it's availability based on health insurance. I currently live in an area of Michigan where I've been fighting that battle most recently for 2 years, and all I get is, I'm sorry, we're not taking any new Medicaid patients right now, because that's all I have for insurance at this point is Michigan's Medicaid. And so I'm finding it hard because I'm sorry, we're not taking new Medicaid patients right now. Which kind of tells you something, but if it's not available, and as I said last week, I don't have a car, I don't have my own money, so I can't just outright pay for this. I have to go with what I have, which means that the last 12 and a half years of PTSD, I have been doing the best I can to just feel better and to function in a healthy way, not an unhealthy way. So studying herbology and potions for me would actually, I would have to add to the list, but because I would really like to find some help for PTSD, dementia, anything like that. Certainly there's something from the magical world that we could actually use for real world mental health issues. And I like to imagine that Neville, being as good at herbology as he is, it's canon that he becomes a herbology professor after Professor Sprout retires. That Neville, with his knowledge of plants and everything, and without the viciousness of Professor Snape, if he had a better potions teacher, I think Neville could actually come up with something to help his parents in some way. I do believe it is canon, meaning this came from J.K. Rowling herself, that is not the case, but she can go fuck herself for all I care. I like to believe that Neville did find a way, with his love of herbology and having somebody who's good at potions help him help his parents. So for those of you who don't know the story, just wait. Anyway, so that's a long answer for the question, and to be fair, I'm going to boil it down to one, and I would have to say it would be charms, because that would be the most practical in everyday life. Alohomora. As long as you got your wand with you all the time, you've always got a flashlight. So Lumos and Nox. Aguamenti for water. Expecto Patronum would have been great last weekend with my weekend from hell that I talked about in last week's episode. So actually 2 weeks ago, as you're seeing this, last week as I'm recording this, there's just a ton. Expelliarmus would be fun. Wingardium Leviosa would be fun. And practical, I'd have to go with charms. So, how would you prefer to travel in the magical world? Personally, I would love to try all of them before deciding. But given how everything is described in the books, I would say a broomstick would be the most fun. But apparition as the most practical and the fastest way of getting from point A to B. Which would be nice, because if I just felt like visiting my niece for a couple hours, I could apparate to California. And if that's too far, make a couple jumps, get at the halfway point between Michigan and California, and okay, let's apparate to Denver. Oh, okay, let's have lunch while we're here, and then boom, apparate to California, and then, oh, I gotta head home. I would love apparition for the ease and the swiftness of travel. But flying on a broomstick, goddamn, that just sounds like so much fun. And I would love to be on a Quidditch team. If I were to have been on a Quidditch team, or stranger things have happened, but probably not like you will actually ever fly on a broomstick. But if we did, I would like to be a beater. I think when I think of like baseball and softball in gym class in high school and stuff, I was always much better hitting the ball than I was throwing the ball. I mean, I could throw the ball, obviously, but my aim was a lot more accurate. I remember in high school, it was it had to have been my freshman year, because I didn't need to take gym class my sophomore year. So my freshman year, we were out on the softball field, and we had the guys on the varsity softball team or baseball team. I don't know. We had a small school. But I locked into the pitch to the ball that was coming at me, and I damn near knocked the pitcher out because it was going right for his gut. I think I would have made him throw up, but he caught it. He goes, damn, she's got an arm on her. So I think I would do well as a beater, definitely for Ravenclaw. So, speaking of which, what is your Hogwarts house? And why do and I don't, okay, what's your Hogwarts house? And not from the official Pottermore website, which I believe is now just harrypotter.com. Not that, but if based on the descriptions of all 4 houses, which one do you most align with? That is your Hogwarts house. Now, when I took the quiz, it shows that I'm a Hufflepuff. So officially, I'm a Hufflepuff. But the split between that and Ravenclaw was literally something like 37% Hufflepuff, 36% Ravenclaw. So really, it depends on my mood which house that I would claim when answering this question with anybody. But overall, I'm definitely a Ravenclaw. I mean, my love of learning and, being autistic and some of the things I talked about last week with that. Yeah, I'm a Ravenclaw. Now, if you could use just one spell in your real life, which would it be and how would you use it? So, technically, apparition is a spell. Because as we learn in Deathly Hallows, I don't want to go into too much detail, but there's a part there where Ron's trying to apparate and he can't, not because of the protective charms over where he's being held, but because he doesn't have a wand. That was specifically mentioned. So you have to have your wand on your person. You don't have to hold it like you do for normal spells. You have to have it, you could have it in your pocket, in your robes, but it has to be somewhere on your person. So, my spell of choice, if I could use just one spell, would be apparition, again, for the ease of travel. Although Accio, oh, I'm bored, I left my something upstairs, Accio, whatever, and whoop, I don't have to climb the stairs to go to get it from my bedroom. Left your wallet at home and you're at the grocery store. Shit. Okay, well, hold on. Stand outside, Accio wallet, and then your wallet will come flying however far. But there are tons that could just come in handy. I mean, you've got Scourgify, so you can deep clean things. You have Alohomora, you have Reparo, you have Obliviate, you have Imperio, you have Crucio, you have Stupefy, / Arresto Momentum. They're somewhat interchangeable. Lumos and Nox. You've got Protego. You got Incendio. You got Silencio. There's a lot of people I wish I could use Silencio on, let me tell you. But there are plenty of amazing spells that would be useful. So I would love to hear in the comments your answers to any of these questions. So, what job in the wizarding world seems like the most fun and or rewarding? In other words, which would you most like, even if you have to create it for yourself based on real life occupations? I would love to be a healer, specifically for mental health. So if I were to do something like that, as we're seeing throughout the books and throughout the entire series, that mental health really isn't addressed other than Dementors and her personification, or her analogy for what Dementors are. That was J.K. Rowling's analogy for depression. And so we have Expecto Patronum. But I would very much like to be a healer at St. Mungo's, specifically for mental health issues. So when I was thinking about my answer to this question, I wrote down that I imagine my NEWTs would be potions, herbology, charms, transfiguration, and possibly care of magical creatures. Because we learned throughout the series that magical creatures, unicorn tail hair is used in wands. Unicorn blood will keep you alive, but it curses you. We know about mandrakes. We know about dragon heartstring. We know that there are a lot of components, for lack of a better term, I don't want to say body parts, but components of magical creatures that are used in potion making. So I think I would probably have to do a care of magical creatures NEWT. But I would also like to work in conjunction with the Department of Mysteries too, because at the end of Order of the Phoenix, we learn about the different sections at the Department of Mysteries. So I think that there are some sections within the Department of Mysteries that would be beneficial for me to collaborate with. So that's possible, but ultimately I would like to work at St. Mungo's as a healer. I would also liaise with Muggle psychologists, psychiatrists, neurologists to understand the basic physiology of mental health and psychology much more than I currently do. Even if I go and get my PhD, I would still liaise with Muggle professionals in mental health. So I would basically create my own occupation in the wizarding world as a healer for mental health. Let's see. Oh, here's a fun one. If you could design your own Hogwarts common room based on your actual house, so whether you're Gryffindor, Ravenclaw, Hufflepuff, or Slytherin, what special features would it have? Ravenclaw common room. I would, well, for all four common rooms, I would say a nice snack station. Nothing as extravagant as eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner in the Great Hall, but it would be nice to just have snack stations in each common room, especially when you're up late studying. The poor house elves. I'll stop talking. But it would be nice to have snacks and drinks readily available. I'd also have self-adjusting chairs so that every chair in the common room is as comfortable as possible for each student, no matter who was sitting there previously. Lighting that auto adjust for each student so that it's perfect for everyone in the room at the same time. Although we are all experiencing it differently, this is something that, as an autistic who's highly sensitive to things like that, I'm thinking of terms of comforts and conveniences that I would want as somebody who's highly sensitive, that I think would benefit everybody, regardless. So I think whatever light level works for you, whatever ambient noise level that works for you, maybe you can change that. That would be a fun one too. Definitely snacks. Definitely house sectioned off for each house. Our own gym / club. A club specifically, I'm thinking of things like pool tables and darts and a running track. I love to run. I'm sure I can think of other things, but I would just want to make the common room, specifically the Ravenclaw common room, as comfortable for everybody. And it's a magical castle, so I mean, if I need, slightly less illuminated room, which is what I'm sitting in right now, despite what it looks like on camera, it's fairly dark. I've got a lamp on, and I've got my computer, and I've got a little kind of a whiteboard type of thing, except it's clear plastic and it sits on a base with lights. So I've got a couple of tarot cards that I pulled for the month of August to kind of just give me, that's what I put on there. And, not a lot of light, basically, is what I'm saying. So I would want something adjustable, for everybody. So now we've got a couple would you rather type questions to add to the mix. First one's very easy for me. Anyway, would you rather have Ron or Hermione as your best friend? This one's an easy one. It would be Ron. Because Hermione throughout the entire fucking series drives me up the wall with her constant bossiness, her constant being a know-it-all, her constant nagging would drive me up the wall, because I prefer peace and quiet a lot of the time. And she just doesn't shut up most of the time. Ron tends to lean more toward a Fred and George humor, if you will. He's not afraid to stand up for his friends, getting detention from Snape and Prisoner of Azkaban for pushing back when Snape put Hermione in her place. And he's got really good instincts about things. And he's more open-minded about things than Hermione is. Hermione... I don't want to say that I love Hermione, but I don't hate Hermione too. I mean, she's integral to everything throughout the series, but as a best friend, goddamn, she would drive me up the fucking wall because she wouldn't shut up. She knows everything. She's not very open-minded. She doesn't seem to appreciate Fred and George's sense of humor. Fred and George are two of my favorite characters in the entire book series. It would definitely be Ron for me. So, would you rather attend the Yule Ball or the Quidditch World Cup? I would want to go to the Quidditch World Cup. I'm much more interested in sports than going dancing or going to a bar or going to a club. I would rather dance around like an idiot in my living room, but the Quidditch World Cup, oof. Yeah. And I absolutely love the description and how detailed that entire experience was for Harry. The entire thing about the Quidditch World Cup, I thought that is probably my favorite part in Goblet of Fire, was how detailed the description was. I mean, it was like I was there. I don't know if any of the rest of you felt like that when you read about the Quidditch World Cup, but yeah. The excitement for me just reading it was palpable, And it's one of the moments in the series that I would love. I would absolutely love to experience. Okay. Spend an afternoon at the Burrow with the Weasleys or an afternoon browsing Diagon Alley. This one is difficult for me because I would love to do both. I imagine that during the Christmas holidays, being at the Weasleys would just be the best thing ever. It would be cozy, a lot of yummy food. We get the feeling that Molly is an amazing cook. I would love to eat Molly's food and have her cook for me. Lots of laughs with the Weasley twins, and how welcome I would feel. However, having all the time I want to really explore Diagon Alley like Harry does in Prisoner of Azkaban. You'll know more about that for those who aren't familiar with the story. Harry's birthday trip with Hagrid was really the first fun chapter in the series for me, because it was the first time that we really get to see the wizarding world. We get a glimpse of that in the first chapter. Especially throughout the entire chapter, but this was the first time we were really immersed in it. We got to see Gringotts, we got to see a robe shop, we got to see Ollivanders, and Harry's wand choosing him, the apothecary, the magical menagerie with all the pets, and just Flourish and Blotts with all the books. And oh my God, that would just be so much fun to explore all of that. But again, in the interest of fairness, I would have to say I'd rather spend the holidays at the Burrow with the Weasleys. Okay, another one. Would you rather have a pet hippogriff or a phoenix? I think you all know the answer to that one for me, given the name of this podcast. Yeah, I would rather have a phoenix. Which character would you most want to adventure with? That's an interesting one. I'm going to go in a slightly different direction here and say Ginny. Especially book Ginny. She's wicked smart. She's vivacious. She's funny. And she would likely be up for any adventure. But in addition to that, I think the two of us would just have a lot of fun together without any troubles. Because, at least not any troubles we couldn't solve together. I imagine the two of us would be a lot more like Ron and Harry when it's just the two of them, with some hints of Fred and George in there. Ginny. Well, everybody, Percy really kind of has that Fred and George sense of humor. They seem to enjoy, their shenanigans and stuff. So yeah, I would have to say Ginny for me on that one. And we're getting to the end here with my notes. Let's kind of shift the direction again, because I want to talk about a theory that I read recently about Dumbledore's chocolate frog cards, because I read that according to the theory, it suggests that they are a spy network for Dumbledore. He has rumored, I'm re-listening to the audiobook, so I'm already on Order of the Phoenix. So Harry's been to Dumbledore's office a couple times now. And I don't remember it mentioned, but it wouldn't surprise me that Professor Dumbledore had his own chocolate frog card. So when you think back to the journey from Platform 9 3/4, and Harry's reading the back of the chocolate frog card, and it's Professor Dumbledore, and he turns it over and he's gone. Ron's like, well, you didn't expect him to hang around all day, did you? Because the portraits move in Harry Potter world. I think with this theory, that chocolate frog Dumbledore went to inform the actual Dumbledore at Hogwarts that Harry Potter he's on the train, he's on his way. So, and this is similar to the former headmaster's portraits in the headmaster's office also, where they can visit other portraits at Hogwarts as their primary base, as well as any other portraits of their own that are connected. For example, since I'm in Order of the Phoenix, we see this with Phineas Nigellus Black. He was a headmaster, so his portrait is in Dumbledore's office, but his portrait is also in the room that Harry and Ron shared at Grimmauld Place. So once he's at Grimmauld Place, he can go from portrait to portrait. When he's at Hogwarts, he can go from portrait to portrait within Hogwarts, and this is explained a little bit clearer otherwise in Deathly Hallows. So, yeah, I really like that theory that Dumbledore would have used his chocolate frog cards as a spy network, and that they can visit the chocolate frog card sitting on Dumbledore's desk. So, I made some notes on this and I kind of lost my track. So getting back to Harry's first experience with the portrait pictures of the Wizards, we saw that Dumbledore had left the chocolate frog card, and that Dumbledore from the card was informing the real Dumbledore at Hogwarts that Harry Potter had managed to successfully board the Hogwarts Express, as I just mentioned. So, yeah. So, to kind of wrap up this discussion, what is one of your favorite theories? I would love to hear one of your favorite theories about that. So, yeah, I think we're going to do it for this week. And I think I will do this from time to time throughout the series, because I imagine I'm going to come across other chapters throughout the series where, especially in Chamber of Secrets and Prisoner of Azkaban, where there are probably going to be weeks where the chapter just doesn't connect with anything from my life that I feel is of value to share with you. But it would be a good idea to do that, to interject. So I might still interject that throughout the remaining 4 books beyond Prisoner of Azkaban. But each episode is going to be pretty heavy duty once we get there, because that's when her writing gets a lot more detailed and things start really happening. And there's going to be a lot to talk about from week to week. I anticipate needing to do 2 episodes per chapter once we start rolling into Goblet of Fire. So I'll probably start making a point when I get to that part of doing something like this just to have a breather. We're not going to talk about anything from the book. We're just going to have a fun conversation to just kind of shake things off, because especially getting into Goblet of Fire, those of us who do know the story know how heavy and intense it gets. So I think that's going to be a good idea to inject episodes like this every so often, just for some fun. But through Chamber of Secrets and Prisoner of Azkaban, if I come across a chapter like this one, I did the recap of Norbert the Norwegian Ridgeback, but there wasn't much in it that I felt really connected to, even using like ChatGPT to help me, what psychological themes could I discuss from this chapter. And I got some great suggestions, but nothing that really applied to me. So I thought, you know what? Let's lighten it up, especially after last week's episode. So, yeah, I think that's everything that I want to say. So, thank you for joining me. I hope I don't turn off a lot of you for not talking about heavy duty stuff this week. But after last week, and as I'm recording this one, I recorded the other one about an hour ago. So I needed to lighten it up. So I'm glad this unfolded the way it did. So anyway, we will get back into it next week, I promise, with chapter 15, The Forbidden Forest. We'll see Harry's story come together as it relates to the Sorcerer's Stone. And until next week, I don't have anything specific to remind you of directly from the book. I'm just going to remind you to please take time to relax and unwind whenever you need to. The last several weeks of my life with my mental health has been really intense. I've had some crazy experiences. Last week's episode, go back and listen to that. It's important to inject fun. It's important to inject some lightheartedness every so often, especially when you're dealing with such heavy topics. And for me, being vulnerable and sharing a lot of these things with a bunch of strangers on the internet at this point. So take care of yourself this week. Do something fun for yourself this week. And I'll see you next week. We'll talk about the Forbidden Forest as we start wrapping things up. Because after next week with the Forbidden Forest, we've got 2 weeks left. And then we start diving into Chamber of Secrets, which for me means I will probably be finishing everything up for Sorcerer's Stone by next weekend, and we'll be diving into the research, the writing, etc. for Chamber of Secrets in another week. So we're getting there. We're getting there. We're going to roll into Chamber of Secrets soon. But until next week, please take care of yourself. Do something fun. I love you guys. Thank you for watching. And because I suck at reminding you about the calls to action, if you like this episode or any of the other episodes of this podcast, please like, comment, subscribe, share, all the things. And hopefully next week will be a much better one for me, and I hope it's a wonderful one for you. So I'll talk to you next week.